Have you ever wondered what happens when your worst enemy suddenly becomes your only hope? Imagine being trapped in a room with the one person who drives you crazy, only to discover that they're not quite who you thought they were. This is a story about rivalry, secrets, and unexpected connections, the kind of moments that change everything. Picture this: a quiet little town where everyone knows each other's business, where reputations are made or broken on the smallest things. It's the kind of place where winning matters a lot. And if there's one thing I've always cared about, it's coming out on top. But standing in my way was him. You know the type? Effortlessly talented, always smiling, and somehow managing to make life look easy. He had a way of showing up just when I thought I'd finally pulled ahead, stealing the spotlight without even trying. To say we didn't get along would be an understatement. Every competition, every argument, it all felt personal. But none of that prepared me for what happened next. What started as a harmless prank turned into something I never could have predicted. One wrong move, one twist of fate, and suddenly we were stuck together, alone, in a love hotel. Now, before you jump to conclusions, let me tell you, it wasn't romantic. At least, not at first. If anything, it was chaotic, awkward, and downright infuriating. But here's the thing: sometimes being forced into close quarters with someone reveals sides of them and yourself that you never expected to see. By the time we walked out of that room, neither of us was the same. In this video, you'll hear the full story, from the tension-filled beginning to the shocking turns that followed. You'll learn how misunderstandings can lead to breakthroughs, why our biggest rivals often mirror our deepest insecurities, and how stepping outside your comfort zone can change your perspective forever. Trust me, you won't want to miss the twists and revelations that unfold along the way. So, whether you're here for the drama, the humor, or the lessons hidden within, stick around until the end. Because this isn't just a story about two people stuck in a bizarre situation. It's about growth, connection, and discovering truths we might otherwise ignore. Welcome to the channel, by the way. If you enjoy stories that mix suspense, emotion, and a touch of inspiration, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. Now, let's dive into the moment it all began, the prank that spiraled completely out of control. The rivalry between us didn't just appear out of thin air. It was years in the making. It started small, almost insignificant at first. A casual comment here, a competitive glare there. But over time, it grew into something bigger, something that shaped both our lives in ways neither of us could have anticipated. It all began back in high school, during a basketball game that should have been forgettable but somehow stuck with me for years. I was determined to prove myself on the court, to show everyone watching that I had what it took to win. And then there he was, my rival. He wasn't even on the varsity team yet, just a bench warmer who got called up because they were shorthanded. But somehow, when the ball landed in his hands, everything changed. With seconds left on the clock, he sank the winning shot. Everyone cheered, and I stood there frozen, clutching my jersey like it could shield me from the sting of defeat. That moment became the blueprint for every interaction we'd have after. Whether it was sports, academics, or later, professional achievements, he always seemed to come out ahead. Like the time we were paired together for a group project in college. Our professor praised his presentation skills while barely acknowledging mine. Or that one work meeting where my carefully prepared pitch was overshadowed by his off-the-cuff suggestions. Each loss chipped away at my confidence, leaving me more frustrated and more determined to beat him. But here's the thing: as much as I hated losing to him, I couldn't deny how much respect I secretly had for him. Sure, I told myself it was annoyance, irritation, maybe even jealousy. But deep down, there was admiration too. How could there not be? He made things look so effortless, like he didn't even need to try. Meanwhile, I was pouring every ounce of energy I had into staying ahead, only to fall short again and again. It was exhausting, but it kept me going. What made it worse was how calm and collected he always seemed. On the surface, anyway. Looking back now, I realized he wasn't as confident as he appeared. There were cracks in his armor if you knew where to look. The way his smile faltered sometimes, or how he avoided eye contact when someone praised him too enthusiastically. Back then, though, I didn't notice, or maybe I didn't want to. All I saw was the guy who kept beating me, who kept standing between me and whatever finish line I was chasing. And yet, despite all the animosity, there was something else lurking beneath the surface. Something I didn't fully understand until much later. Every time he smiled, that infuriatingly perfect smile, every time he brushed past me with that quiet confidence, I felt something. Not just anger, though I told myself that's all it was. No, it was deeper than that. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was envy. Or maybe, it shames me to admit now, it was admiration. Looking back, I think to myself now, maybe it wasn't just anger I felt every time I saw him smile. This constant push and pull defined our relationship for years. We weren't friends, but we weren't exactly enemies either. More like two magnets repelling each other, unable to connect no matter how close we got. Still, through every clash, every argument, every silent battle of wills, there was an unspoken understanding between us. We pushed each other harder than anyone else ever could. Without realizing it, we were shaping each other, forcing each other to grow. Which brings us to the day everything changed. It started innocently enough, a harmless prank meant to knock him down a peg. I thought would be funny, a little payback for all those times he'd bested me. What I didn't know was that this prank would spiral completely out of control, pulling us both into a situation neither of us could have imagined. Little did I know this harmless act would lead us straight into a love hotel. Alone. Together. The prank started as a simple idea, something to take him down a notch, to remind everyone, and myself, that he wasn't invincible. It was supposed to be harmless, funny even, just enough to rattle his perfect composure for once. I didn't plan on it spiraling out of control. But then again, when do these things ever go according to plan? It all began with an overheard conversation. Someone mentioned that he had been talking about celebrating some personal milestone, a promotion, or maybe just a random excuse to treat himself, and jokingly suggested booking a room at one of those infamous love hotels downtown. The kind of place people rent by the hour and never talk about afterward. My ears perked up immediately. A love hotel? That was too good to pass up. I decided to play along. Not directly, of course. I'm not stupid enough to confront him head on. Instead, I enlisted a few mutual acquaintances to drop subtle hints in his ear. "Oh, you should totally check it out," they teased. "It's got everything. Heart-shaped tubs, mood lighting, chocolate-covered strawberries." To my surprise, he actually seemed interested. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was boredom, but whatever the reason, he took the bait. He booked a room for later that evening under a fake name. That's where my masterstroke came in. Using connections from a friend who worked part-time at the hotel, I managed to get access to their system long enough to adjust his reservation. Instead of a standard check-in time, I changed it to coincide with mine. The goal? Walk in right behind him, catch him red-handed, snap a picture, and send it around to everyone we knew. Harmless, right? Embarrassing, sure, but nothing too damaging. At least, that's what I told myself. Fast forward to that night, and things were already going sideways before I even arrived. For starters, traffic was worse than expected, which meant I showed up late. By the time I reached the hotel, nerves were eating away at me. Was this really such a great idea? Too late to back out now. I marched inside, trying to look casual, only to find chaos. Apparently, there'd been some kind of mix-up with the reservations. When I walked in, the lobby staff were frantically apologizing to guests, saying the system had double-booked several rooms, including ours. Except it wasn't just his room anymore. Somehow, my name had ended up on the same reservation. Before I could explain, the manager ushered us both toward the elevator, insisting it would be sorted out upstairs. And then, disaster struck. As soon as the door clicked shut behind us, the power went out. Lights flickered off, plunging the entire room into darkness. Panic set in almost instantly. We fumbled around, searching for switches and emergency exits, but nothing worked. Then came the worst part. The automatic lock engaged. A safety feature, apparently. Great timing. Universe. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stood there in stunned silence, staring at each other through the dim glow of our phone screens. Finally, he broke the tension. "What the hell is going on?" His voice was sharp, accusatory. Like this was somehow my fault. Which, okay, fair point, it kinda was. But still, I don't know. I snapped back, defensive instincts kicking in. Maybe your dumb idea to stay here jinxed everything. My dumb idea? He laughed bitterly. You're the one who followed me in here like some creepy stalker. Excuse me? If you hadn't fallen for such an obvious setup. Setup? What are you even talking about? The argument escalated quickly, fueled by shock, denial, and frustration. Neither of us wanted to admit how ridiculous the situation was, or how trapped we felt, literally and figuratively. Every word we exchanged felt like another brick added to the wall between us. Yet beneath the anger, there was something else. Fear, uncertainty, and maybe, just maybe, a tiny sliver of guilt. We tried everything to get out. Banging on the door, calling the front desk, even attempting to jimmy the lock ourselves. Nothing worked. The hotel staff promised help was on the way, but hours passed without anyone showing up. Meanwhile, the absurdity of our surroundings became impossible to ignore. Heart-shaped pillows, neon signs spelling out cheesy phrases, a jacuzzi big enough for 10 people. It was surreal. At one point, I accidentally pressed a button on the remote control mounted to the wall. Suddenly, disco lights flashed across the ceiling, accompanied by loud music blasting from hidden speakers. He burst out laughing despite himself, clutching his sides as tears streamed down his face. Seriously? He choked out between gasps. This can't be real. His laughter broke the tension, for a moment, anyway. I couldn't help but crack a smile too, though I tried to hide it. It was hard not to laugh when faced with something so utterly ridiculous. Still, the humor didn't last long. Reality came crashing back as we realized we were truly stuck together, alone, and neither of us knew how long it would last. At first, the tension between us was suffocating. Every word we exchanged felt like a spark waiting to ignite another explosion. The blame game started almost immediately. "This is your fault," he said, pacing back and forth across the tacky, heart-shaped carpet. "You're the one who followed me here." "My fault? If you hadn't booked this ridiculous place in the first place." "Oh, come on. You think I didn't know you were tailing me? What kind of loser spends their evenings stalking someone else?" "Excuse me? Who even does this? Who books a room at a love hotel just for kicks?" We went back and forth like that for what felt like hours, each accusation sharper than the last. Neither of us wanted to admit how completely absurd and embarrassing the situation was. But as much as we argued, neither of us could deny the growing sense of unease. We were stuck, alone, with no clear way out. And worse still, there was nothing to distract us from each other. The room itself became both our prison and our battleground. At one point, while trying to figure out how to adjust the thermostat, because apparently love hotels have mood lighting but no proper air conditioning, I accidentally triggered some sort of romantic ambience feature. Suddenly, rose petals began raining down from hidden compartments in the ceiling. He froze mid-sentence, staring up at them in disbelief. "What is happening right now?" he asked, his voice tinged with horror. "I don't know," I shouted, frantically pressing buttons on the wall panel. "I didn't mean to do that." He burst into laughter again, shaking his head. Of course this would happen. For a moment, the animosity softened. It was impossible not to laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. Rose petals fluttered onto the floor, adding to the chaos around us. Still, the humor didn't last long. As soon as the novelty wore off, the tension returned, thicker than ever. But amidst the arguments and frustration, something unexpected began to emerge. Glimpses of vulnerability. For instance, I noticed how he handled stress differently than I did. While I was pacing and ranting, visibly agitated, he sat quietly on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. His calm demeanor wasn't arrogance. It was methodical. He seemed to process things internally, analyzing every detail before reacting. That made me curious. Was this how he approached everything? Was this why he always seemed so composed, even when others fell apart? Then there were the quirks, like how he hummed softly under his breath whenever he was deep in thought, or how he absent-mindedly twisted the ring on his finger, a habit I'd never noticed before. These small details humanized him in a way I hadn't expected. He wasn't just my rival anymore. He was a person, someone with habits, insecurities, and maybe even fears. As time dragged on, survival instincts kicked in. Hunger set in early, and neither of us had eaten since lunch. After another round of bickering about whose turn it was to call the front desk, spoiler, neither of us succeeded in getting through. We decided to search the mini fridge. Wow, he muttered, pulling out a suspiciously overpriced bottle of sparkling water. Classy. At least it's not empty. I shot back, grabbing a packet of stale crackers that we divided the meager supplies begrudgingly. But the act of sharing, even something as pathetic as expired snacks, felt oddly unifying. For once, we weren't competing. We were cooperating. That shift continued as we tackled other problems together. When the disco lights refused to turn off, we worked side by side to figure out which switch controlled them. When the jacuzzi started filling itself with scalding hot water, we scrambled to shut it off before flooding the entire room. Each challenge forced us to communicate, however reluctantly, and somewhere along the way, the tone began to change. The insults became less biting, the sarcasm more playful. There was still plenty of frustration, sure, but it was tempered by shared experiences. Point one particularly memorable moment came when we discovered the hotel's surprise button. Neither of us knew what it did, but curiosity got the better of us. Against my better judgment, I pressed it. The room erupted into a cacophony of sound effects. Birds chirping, waves crashing, and what sounded suspiciously like moaning. Both of us froze, wide-eyed, before bursting into uncontrollable laughter. "This has to be illegal," he gasped, clutching his stomach. "No kidding," I managed between giggles. "What kind of business model is this?" For a few minutes, we forgot about being rivals. Forgot about being trapped. All that mattered was the absurdity of it all. By the time the laughter subsided, we were sitting side by side on the floor, leaning against the bed frame. "Okay," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "Let's agree on one thing. If we make out of here alive, we never speak of this again." "Deal," I replied, surprising myself with how easily the words slipped out. In that moment, something shifted. Not dramatically, not permanently, but enough to leave an impression. For the first time, I saw him not as my rival, but as someone who, like me, was just trying to survive the madness. As the hours ticked by, the initial chaos of our predicament began to settle into something quieter, a strange kind of calm that came from exhaustion and acceptance. With no immediate escape in sight, we had little else to do but talk. At first, the conversations were superficial. Complaints about the hotel's bizarre features, sarcastic remarks about the lack of service, or jokes about how absurdly over the top everything was. But as the night wore on, something shifted. The walls between us, built over years of rivalry and resentment, started to crack. That IT began innocently enough. He asked me why I hated him so much. "I don't hate you," I replied quickly, maybe too quickly. "You just irritate me." He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Fair enough, but there has to be more to it than that. No one gets this worked up over someone they just find annoying." His question caught me off guard. For years, I told myself my animosity toward him was simple jealousy. He was better at everything, or at least it felt that way. But now, sitting across from him in this ridiculous room, I realized it wasn't just about losing competitions or being overshadowed. It ran deeper than that. Somehow, he represented everything I thought I lacked: confidence, charisma, perfection. "You make things look easy," I admitted finally, staring down at my hands. "Everything you do seems effortless, like you're not even trying. Meanwhile, I'm out here killing myself just to keep up and still falling short." To my surprise, he didn't smirk or laugh. Instead, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's funny," he said softly, "because I've always envied you." "Me?" I blurted, incredulous. "Why would you envy me? You're the one everyone loves." "Exactly," he said bitterly. "Everyone loves the version of me they see on the surface. The guy who wins awards, gives speeches, looks good in photos. But nobody knows what it's like behind the scenes. The pressure to live up to expectations, to never let anyone down. His voice trailed off, but the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, I saw him not as my rival, but as someone real, someone flawed, struggling, and deeply human. The conversation deepened from there, shifting to topics neither of us had ever discussed with anyone before. We talked about our childhoods, how I grew up feeling invisible next to my older siblings, always striving for attention, how he was constantly compared to his successful parents, expected to follow in their footsteps without question. We're not that different, you know, he said after a long pause. Both of us chasing something we can't quite reach. I nodded slowly, realizing how true his words were. Despite all the competition, all the arguments, we shared more similarities than differences. Both of us carried insecurities we hid behind masks of confidence. Both of us craved validation, even if we pretended otherwise. As the night stretched on, the conversation turned to dreams and fears. He confessed that he'd always wanted to pursue music, but gave it up because it wasn't practical. I admitted that I dreamed of writing novels, but never believed I was good enough to try. It's funny, he mused. We spend so much time trying to prove ourselves to other people that we forget what actually matters to us. His words struck a chord. How many times had I pushed myself to win, only to feel emptier afterward? How often had I let fear hold me back from taking risks? Listening to him speak, I couldn't help but wonder if our rivalry had been less about genuine dislike and more about projecting my own insecurities onto him. But it wasn't just vulnerability on his part. It was moments of connection, too. Like when he mentioned how lonely it felt to move cities every few years as a kid. Or how he still kept a journal filled with half-finished poems he was too embarrassed to share. These glimpses of his softer side made me see him in a new light. Behind the polished exterior was someone who, like me, felt misunderstood and isolated. And then there were the subtler moments, the ones that hinted at something neither of us dared to name. Like when he accidentally brushed my hand while reaching for a snack, and neither of us pulled away immediately. Or when he smiled at me during one of his stories, his eyes soft and genuine in a way I'd never noticed before. For the first time, I thought to myself, I'm seeing him as more than just my rival. By the time we fell silent again, the mood in the room had changed entirely. The hostility was gone, replaced by an unspoken understanding. We weren't friends, not yet, but we weren't enemies anymore either. As dawn began to break outside the window, casting faint light into the room, I realized something profound. This night hadn't just brought us closer together. It had forced me to confront parts of myself I'd buried long ago. And perhaps, somewhere along the way, it had done the same for him. Just as we started to find a rhythm, a fragile but undeniable connection, the universe decided it wasn't done messing with us. The power, which had flickered back on briefly earlier, went out again without warning. This time it stayed off. No lights, no air conditioning, no working phone lines. Just silence and the creeping realization that we were truly on our OWNAT first. We tried to stay calm. It's fine, he said, pulling out his phone flashlight. We'll figure it out. But even he sounded less confident than before. The darkness seemed heavier now, pressing down on us like a physical weight. Then came another complication, a loud knock at the door. Both of us froze, exchanging wide-eyed glances. Who could possibly be knocking on a love hotel room door in the middle of the night? Who is it? I called hesitantly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound brave. A muffled voice responded from the other side. Hotel staff. Is everything okay in there? Relief washed over me. At least until we realized they couldn't get the key card system to work either. After several minutes of frustrated shouting through the door, it became clear help wasn't coming anytime soon. The situation grew more tense when we heard footsteps retreating down the hall. Wait, I shouted, banging on the door. Don't leave. But the sound faded into nothingness. He sank onto the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. This keeps getting worse. No kidding, I muttered, pacing back and forth. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if no one came back? What if something happened to the hotel staff? What if we need to focus, he interrupted, cutting off my spiraling thoughts. His tone was firm but gentle, grounding me in the moment. Panicking won't help. And so, reluctantly, I forced myself to take a breath. Together, we assessed our options. With no electricity and limited supplies, survival mode kicked in once again. Point one of the biggest challenges? Food, or rather, the lack of it. The mini fridge had been emptied hours ago, leaving us with only a single packet of instant noodles left. Cooking them was easier said than done without power. We can use the hot water tap, he suggested, inspecting the tiny bathroom sink. If we let it run long enough, it might get warm enough to soften them. I raised an eyebrow, skeptically. You really think that's going to work? It's worth a shot, he replied with a shrug. What followed was a chaotic yet oddly hilarious attempt at culinary improvisation. We ended up spilling half the noodles onto the counter, burning ourselves on lukewarm water, and arguing over whether seasoning packets should go in before or after soaking. By the time we finally managed to cobble together something edible, neither of us cared how bad it tasted. Laughter bubbled up between bites, easing some of the tension that had built throughout the night, but not all complications were so lighthearted. As the hours dragged on, emotions began to surface in ways neither of us anticipated. Exhaustion stripped away the last layers of pretense, forcing us to confront lingering doubts and insecurities. You know, he said quietly during a rare moment of quiet, I've always wondered why you hate losing so much. I don't hate losing, I corrected reflexively. Then, catching his skeptical look, I sighed. Okay, maybe I do. But it's not just about winning or losing. It's about feeling enough. He nodded slowly, understanding flashing across his face. That makes sense. You're not alone, though. I feel the same way sometimes. His admission caught me off guard. For someone who seemed so self-assured, hearing him admit to feelings of inadequacy felt surreal and strangely comforting. It reminded me how much we still didn't know about each other. But then things took an unexpected turn. In the midst of another conversation, he paused, staring at me with an intensity that made my stomach twist. There's something else I need to say, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. What is it? I asked. My heart pounding, he hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. Finally, he blurted out, I think I have feelings for you. The room fell silent. My brain scrambled to process what he just said. Feelings? For me? This was the last thing I expected, to hear those words come from him, of all people. What are you talking about? I stammered, my voice shaking. I don't know, he admitted, looking away. Maybe it's because we've been stuck here together, or maybe it's been building for a while. Either way, I can't ignore it anymore. Shock gave way to confusion, then frustration. Are you serious right now? Of all times, you choose this moment to drop a bombshell like that. I didn't plan this, he snapped, defensive now. Do you think I wanted to fall for someone who hates me? That's not fair. I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface. I never said I hated you. Well, you sure acted like it. The argument escalated quickly, fueled by raw emotion and unresolved tension. Every word felt like a grenade, tearing apart the fragile bond we'd worked so hard to build. But beneath the anger, there was something else, something I couldn't quite name. A flutter of uncertainty, a pang of longing. Could it be possible? Did I feel the same way before I could answer or even fully process what was happening? Another noise interrupted us. This time, it was louder, the unmistakable sound of someone jiggling the doorknob. They're back, I whispered, my voice barely audible. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging heavy in the air. Whatever was about to happen next, whether we escaped or stayed trapped longer, one thing was certain. Our connection would never be the same. The tension between us reached its breaking point. The argument we'd been skirting around all night finally erupted, raw and unfiltered. Every unresolved issue, every insecurity, every lingering doubt came pouring out in a torrent of words neither of us could hold back. You don't get to say things like that, I shouted, pacing the room like a caged animal. You can't just drop something huge like that on me and expect me to know how to react. And you think this is easy for me? He shot back, his voice rising to match mine. Do you have any idea how long I've kept this inside? How many times I've convinced myself it was stupid, impossible, wrong, wrong? I stopped mid-step, turning to face him. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. Is that what you really think? That feeling something makes you wrong? No, he said, quieter now, but still intense. But pretending it doesn't exist, that's what's been killing me. His vulnerability cut through my anger, leaving me exposed. I wanted to yell, to scream, to push him away, but deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't about him or even about us. It was about fear. Fear of rejection, of change, of stepping into unknown territory. And yet, despite everything, there was a part of me that didn't want to let go of the connection we'd built. Not now. Not after everything we'd been through. I'm not saying it's wrong, I said finally, my voice trembling. I'm saying I don't know how to deal with this. With you. We're supposed to hate each other, remember? That's what we've always done. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, well, hate is easier than facing the truth. But here we are, stuck together, forced to actually talk instead of compete. What do you want me to do? Rewind time and pretend none of this happened. No, I whispered, shaking my head. But maybe we can stop pretending we're enemies. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, closing the distance between us. His eyes searched mine, looking for something, hope, maybe, or permission. I'm not asking for anything, he said softly. Just don't shut me out. Not again. It was a plea, simple and honest, and it broke me. All the walls I'd built over the years crumbled in an instant, leaving me raw and vulnerable. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing my fingers against his. It was tentative, almost hesitant, but enough to bridge the gap between us that we stood there for a long moment, hands touching, hearts racing. No words were needed. The gesture spoke louder than anything either of us could have said. In that moment, forgiveness wasn't something we declared. It was something we felt silently and profoundly. Then, as if on cue, the door clicked open. Someone from the hotel staff had finally managed to override the lock, freeing us from our confinement. Bright light flooded the room, blinding after hours spent in near darkness. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, reluctantly, we pulled apart, stepping toward the doorway. Outside, the world felt impossibly vast compared to the tiny bubble we'd shared. Staff members apologized profusely, explaining that a citywide power outage had caused the delays. As we walked out into the cool night air, reality hit hard. The spell of the hotel room faded, replaced by the weight of unanswered questions. What happened next? Where did we go from here? Neither of us spoke as we made our way to the parking lot. When we reached his car, he turned to me, hesitating. So, he began, his voice uncertain. What now? I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just my rival, but someone who had become so much more. Someone who challenged me, who understood me in ways no one else ever had. I don't know, I admitted, smiling faintly. But whatever happens, I'm glad we got stuck in that room. He smiled back, the kind of smile that lit up his whole face. Me too. And then, without another word, he got into his car and drove off, leaving me standing there under the stars. As I watched him disappear into the distance, I realized something. While the crisis might have ended, our story was far from over. After stepping out of that love hotel, everything felt different. The world hadn't changed. It was still the same streets, the same buildings, the same people rushing past. But we had. Something inside me shifted during those hours trapped together. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't go back to seeing him as just my rival. The days that followed were strange. We didn't talk about what happened. Not directly, anyway. Instead, our interactions became charged with unspoken meaning. A glance across a crowded room carried more weight than any argument ever could. When we passed each other in the hallway at work or crossed paths at a mutual friends gathering, there was an undeniable tension, but not the kind fueled by anger or competition. It was softer, quieter, like an invisible thread pulling us closer even as we pretended to keep our distance, that I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. Like how he always greeted strangers with genuine warmth, or how he seemed to carry himself with quiet confidence rather than arrogance. Even his quirks, the way he tapped his pen against his notebook while thinking or hummed under his breath when he thought no one was listening, felt endearing now. These small details painted a picture of someone far more complex than the persona I'd built up in my mind. But it wasn't just about him. This experience forced me to confront parts of myself I'd buried for years. For so long, I defined myself by comparison, by trying to prove I was better, smarter, faster. But being stuck in that hotel made me realize how exhausting that mindset was. Competing with him hadn't brought me happiness. If anything, it had left me feeling emptier every time I won. What I really wanted wasn't validation from others. It was connection, understanding, vulnerability. One day, weeks after the incident, we found ourselves in the same coffee shop. At first, neither of us acknowledged the other. I sat at a corner table, sipping my latte and pretending to focus on my book, while he stood in line waiting to order. But when he turned around, tray in hand, our eyes met. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seat across from me. For a split second, I considered saying no. Old habits die hard, after all. But instead, I nodded. "Sure." He slid into the chair, setting his cup down carefully. There was a beat of awkward silence before he spoke. "So how have you been?" It was such a simple question, yet it carried layers of subtext. Was he asking about my life? Or about us? "I'm good," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Things are different." "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly. "Different's not always bad, though." "No," I agreed, returning his smile. "It's not." We talked for nearly an hour that day, covering everything from work projects to random hobbies we'd picked up recently. It wasn't groundbreaking conversation, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was the ease between us, the sense that we were finally meeting each other as equals, without the shadow of rivalry looming over us. Over time, these moments became more frequent. Small gestures replaced old habits. Instead of glaring at each other across a conference table, we exchanged knowing looks. Instead of competing for attention in group settings, we supported each other's ideas. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, reminders of how far we'd come. But progress was undeniable. For me, the biggest change was learning to embrace vulnerability. Before, I'd seen it as weakness, something to hide at all costs. But being trapped in that hotel taught me that vulnerability is where real growth happens. By letting down my guard, even just a little, I opened myself up to understanding not only him, but also myself in ways I never expected. And him? He seemed different too. More open, less guarded. Whether it was because of what we'd shared or simply because he'd grown alongside me, I couldn't say. But there was a lightness to him now, a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. Still, questions lingered. Where did we stand? Were we friends? Something more? Or just two people navigating the aftermath of an extraordinary experience? Neither of us had answers, and maybe that was okay. Some stories don't need tidy endings. They thrive on possibility, on hope. One evening, weeks later, I saw him again at a local art gallery opening. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, everything else faded away. He smiled, a soft, tentative smile, and raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. I returned the gesture, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. As I turned back to the paintings on the wall, I realized something. This wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning. Whatever came next, whether friendship, romance, or something entirely new, I knew we'd face it together. And that thought filled me with a quiet, steady hope. This story may have started with rivalry, but it ended with something far more meaningful: acceptance, self-discovery, and the power of unexpected connections. What began as a clash of egos turned into a journey of growth, not just for the protagonist and their rival, but for anyone who's ever let preconceived notions or old grudges define their relationships. At its core, this is a reminder that people are rarely who we think they are on the surface. Behind every confident smile, every competitive edge, lies a person with fears, dreams, and insecurities. Sometimes all it takes is stepping outside our comfort zones or getting locked in a love hotel to see someone in a new light, but it's also a lesson in vulnerability. For so long, the protagonist fought to prove themselves through competition, only to find that true strength comes from embracing who you are and letting others do the same. By opening up, even when it felt risky, they discovered a deeper connection than any rivalry could offer. So, as you reflect on this story, I encourage you to think about your own life. Are there people you've written off too quickly? Relationships you've let stereotypes or past conflicts overshadow? Maybe it's time to take a second look. You never know what might change if you give someone and yourself a chance to grow. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It means the world to us. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own experiences with unexpected connections. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Because trust me, there's always more where this came from. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most unforgettable moments happen when you least expect them.